we're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties, and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just weeks.
When asked why so many of the hydrants in the Palisades ran out of water, Governor Newsom said the local folks are trying to figure that out. Yeah, you got to do that before the fire.
Something unusual happened on Bill Maher's stage. No punchlines, no cushioning, just sharp, deliberate precision. California's most polished political image was quietly taken apart, statistic by statistic, moment by moment. When a lifelong liberal begins asking those kinds of questions, it signals a deeper fracture beneath the surface. Was this simply comedy, or a rare moment of honesty from the left itself? Tonight, we look at why Gavin Newsom's California turned into Maher's most uncomfortable truth, and why the timing could not be worse.
I see today the Trump administration, they talked about the fact that California had a rule that schools cannot be required to notify parents if their kids in school have changed their gender, their pronouns. That's the kind of thing, even though it doesn't affect a lot of people, that makes a lot of people go, well, you know what? That's the party without common sense. Now, if that's your state, how are you?
Before we move on, hit that like button and subscribe, because you already know you won't want to miss what comes next. The strange thing about California's decline is that it didn't arrive looking like a clear villain or making a big show of it. Instead, it showed up in sharp suits, bright press conferences, and smooth speeches that sounded like TED Talks, delivered by a man who found a thesaurus and decided he was never going to put it down.
And it's my home. And stupid as its origin may be, it's not going anywhere. Axios ran a story on how getting the water out of the hydrants in Pacific Palisades was more complicated than it seems. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's very complicated. That's why I pay 13% of my income in this state every year to people who I assumed were working on things like this.
Gavin Newsom didn't damage California in a loud or messy way, because that would have required real accountability and self-awareness. Instead, it happened smoothly and confidently, powered by the steady belief that image matters far more than reality ever will.
In the state, but look, I understand this notion that you're from the coast, you don't understand those things, you can't talk the language, you're not able to communicate, and you're not able to actually encourage and find that common ground.
It's stuff like there's a new law in this. I think we have way too many regulations and laws, as we've talked about, and this one I think says if you're a department store with over 500 employees, you have to have a gender-neutral toy department. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it.
So you think that's silly? You think that's a silly thing that we too much government there?
This is where Bill Maher comes into the picture, not as a rebel or a right-wing convert, but as the person at the dinner table who finally stops nodding along and asks why the house smells like smoke while everyone else keeps praising the curtains.
The law was you would be fired, a teacher would be fired, if a teacher did not report or snitch on a kid talking about their gender identity. I just think that was wrong. I think teachers should teach. I don't think they should be required to turn in kids. And by the way,
we're talking about their parents. How can you snitch? The idea of a snitch and a parent, to me, doesn't compute.
Well, I don't, but what is the job of a teacher? It's to teach. If Johnny's talking about some identity issue or some issue about liking someone of the same sex, is the teacher's job?
F-bomb comment, he's an evil snake motherfucker.
Bill Maher didn't need to shout or lose his temper, because California's numbers were already doing the yelling. All he had to do was stop pretending the emperor's outfit looked amazing under studio lights. The moment hit harder because it came from someone who had spent years defending the same ideology that was now stumbling over its own contradictions. Under Gavin Newsom, California turned into the world's most expensive social experiment, except the test subjects were taxpayers, small business owners, and anyone who believed buying groceries should feel like a luxury trip through a high-end art museum. Housing prices climbed so high they made medieval castles look like affordable starter homes. And every solution sounded the same. Another committee, another study, another glossy plan promising fairness but delivering confusion dressed up in buzzwords. Bill Maher's frustration felt less political and more existential. because even comedians can only stretch irony so far before it finally breaks.
But he said, I don't think he could win. I don't think he could win. He's too progressive coming from this state and what he's done in this state to win in any southern state, any red state. I disagreed, but no, this is a progressive African-American owned station, and I'm sure they like you, but he doesn't think you can win. What do you say to that if you could win look at the swing states, there's only 8 of them.
Right. Well, I mean, California's an interesting case study, isn't it? It's the size of 21 state populations combined.
California was meant to be the proof that it all worked, the place where progressive ideas met sunshine, money, and innovation. Instead, it slowly turned into a warning sign, where big ambition ran ahead of real competence and slogans took the place of results. Gavin Newsom kept talking, as if the state was booming, which was impressive considering people were leaving faster than tech executives dodging eye contact at a tax meeting. It takes a special kind of confidence to run a state that's losing population while insisting it's more popular than ever, and Newsom perfected that tone with the ease of someone who never has to stand the lines his policies create. Crime became one of those subjects people discussed in quiet voices, trying to sound compassionate while secretly installing security cameras at home. Newsom's approach often seemed to focus on redefining words until the numbers felt less uncomfortable, a strategy that worked right up until people realized their daily lives didn't match the story. Bill Maher cut through that fog by calling out the absurdity of pretending policies were successful just because they were well-intentioned.
Trying to get Gavin to run for president for a very long time. And
are you serious? I mean, give me a fucking break. Come on, really?
Again, my thing with Gavin is, first of all, he can win. First of all, I just like him. I think he's really smart. Is he a politician? Yes. That's the, is he slick? Good. I'm fucking glad he's slick. Slick people win elections. Clinton was slick. Obama was pretty slick.
How do you feel about the way he handled COVID?
There's a strange irony in watching Hollywood elites explain why rising theft is being misunderstood as a social issue while quietly hiring private security to guard their gated homes. California perfected the mix of moral superiority and everyday hypocrisy, and Gavin Newsom became the face of that contradiction, whether he wanted the role or not. Bill Maher seemed far less entertained by it than he once was, maybe because satire stops being funny when it starts feeling like a documentary. Energy policy in California turned into a lesson on how to lecture the rest of the world about the future while struggling to keep the lights on today. Taxes went up as reliably as the sun rising, yet public services somehow always felt underfunded. A puzzle no task force could ever explain. People paid more and got less, which might have been impressive if it weren't so frustrating. Maher pointed out that imbalance with dry humor, knowing satire works best when the truth is already absurd.
Well, I got you here because I live here and I'm not going anywhere. So I just want to make this a better state like everybody else.
Amen.
And good job this year making it rain.
You're welcome.
Because
that was my legislative priority.
It was looking bad there for a while, and we still don't have enough water in the Colorado River and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then whenever I read, 80% of the water goes to agriculture. Almonds.
Right.
No one ever asked you about almonds? Oh, I'm going to ask you about them.
Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom's skill was in spinning every setback as proof of bold leadership, because nothing screams success like explaining why things would be worse if you weren't in charge. His messaging always stayed upbeat, optimistic, and carefully shielded from any inconvenient facts. Bill Maher cut through that shield by simply connecting the dots that had been deliberately kept apart for years. The homelessness crisis became California's most glaring paradox, a humanitarian disaster unfolding in one of the richest places on Earth. The state's regulatory maze turned entrepreneurship into an endurance test, where thriving required not just innovation, but a tolerance for paperwork that bordered on masochism. Newsom's administration seemed to equate complexity with fairness, even as businesses quietly packed up and moved to states with fewer forms and lower taxes. Maher's sarcasm landed perfectly, pointing out the absurdity of chasing away employers while promising to fund massive social programs.
For it. State to reopen.
Not for it.
Shut the schools forever.
Not for it.
Mind you, with no mask on at the French Laundry after saying you can't.
Again, you are just, I think you've been captured by this.
No, I haven't.
He's
a hypocrite, and that bothers me. If he was
he went to the wrong restaurant. Really?
Bill,
this is it,
he
like
didn't
again.
follow his own rules. If you're going to be a leader,
it.
you lead by example. That's not fucking dandruff.
California's cultural vibe shifted from inspiring to preachy, and Gavin Newsom became the face of that change, delivering polished speeches that felt more like lectures from someone convinced that disagreement meant ignorance. Bill Maher, who's never been a fan of sanctimony, seemed increasingly fed up with the idea that questioning results made you morally suspect. Comedy thrives on irreverence, and California's leadership handed it plenty of material by treating criticism like heresy. Public education followed a similar pattern, big, lofty promises hiding results that stubbornly refused to improve. Transportation became another symbol of the state's struggles. Massive spending led to projects that took decades to finish and still somehow disappointed. Newsom pushed ambitious plans that promised transformation, while commuters sat in traffic wondering if real progress had left them behind.
Do you like Newsom? How do you feel about Newsom?
Had him on my show Friday.
I saw that.
And I first of all, I love him. You just like a guy or you don't. I've known him for a long time. He's done my show for a long time. Do I love everything he does as the governor of California? No, I don't. I wouldn't say I'm undertaxed. Yeah, I have issues with this state. He's a guy. One reason I want him to run for president, well, is because he's obviously a winner.
The striking thing is that Bill Maher's humor thrived on the gap between promise and reality, because nothing invites mockery like grand visions that collide with everyday frustrations. Even California's once legendary reputation for opportunity started to crumble, replaced by the sense that the state had turned into an exclusive club for anyone who could afford inefficiency. Gavin Newsom kept selling the dream, even as the cost of entry rose higher every year. Maher's take felt like a wake-up call wrapped in a smirk, a reminder that dreams lose their charm when they come with fine print nobody can read. Political insulation around Newsom stayed strong for years, largely because criticism was dismissed as partisan noise rather than real concern. California's media often treated him more as a symbol than a manager, celebrating the look of leadership while ignoring the actual mechanics. Maher cut through that by focusing on results, not appearances. Satire became a tool for accountability, using humor to get past defenses that numbers alone could never breach.
You've opened an interesting can of worms, Mr. Gaffigan. So, first of all, you think Gavin Newsom is running for president?
I think he's the likely alternative.
That's interesting because I like Gavin a lot. Now, I hope he runs for president because I think getting to the national stage would help with the one thing I have trouble with him about, which is sometimes he's way too cuckoo.
California's obsession with virtue signaling reached levels that would have impressed even performance artists, with grand declarations of progress that rarely matched reality. Gavin Newsom thrived in this theater, delivering every line with conviction while the world around him quietly fell apart. Bill Maher's sarcastic take highlighted the gap between show and substance, making the whole performance feel more and more absurd. The state's approach to dissent often felt less democratic and more patronizing, as if disagreement were a personal flaw rather than a basic right. The result of these policies left California feeling less like a shining example and more like a cautionary tale. Newsom kept projecting confidence, perhaps hoping that saying things loudly enough would make them true. Maher's commentary made it clear: confidence without accountability becomes arrogance, and arrogance without results becomes comedy.
About the Democrats winning elections.
Yes.
Could they get a Frank Luntz? Could they get somebody who would teach them to name things better? Sanctuary cities.
Yeah, it's not a
great single payer.
Yeah, confusing.
Not helpful. Make people think, oh, that's going to be me.
Yeah.
Global warming sounds nice.
Actually,
Jesus Christ, can we just name things better? Can we start with that?
California's future is still uncertain, but its present offers plenty of material for anyone willing to look past the slogans. Gavin Newsom's time in office serves as a lesson in how style can outshine substance, at least until the bill comes due. Bill Maher's role wasn't to tear down an ideology, but to remind viewers that reality eventually catches up. The humor worked because it didn't invent flaws or exaggerate imaginary failures. It simply pointed out contradictions already unfolding in real time. In the end, the impact was less about betrayal and more about fatigue, the kind that sets in when promises constantly outrun results. Newsom remains polished, articulate, and confident, but those qualities can no longer hide the mounting consequences beneath them.
Well, he was the mayor of San Francisco, right?
Yeah, but, you know, that was a different time, and fighting for gay rights was, you know, a great thing.
Yeah.
At a time when that fight was still going on and needed to be fought on that level.
I remember moving to New York in the early 90s, and I think there was, some gay activists had shut down the Brooklyn Bridge.
At this point, Bill Maher's commentary hit home because it recognized that loving an idea doesn't mean defending its worst execution. California's story under Gavin Newsom isn't over, but the chapter so far reads less like a triumph and more like a cautionary comedy. Maher didn't need to exaggerate or make things up. The reality already provided all the material he needed. The laughter that followed wasn't mean-spirited but corrective, a reminder that it might be time to stop clapping for speeches and start checking the scoreboard. Unfortunately for Newsom, the scoreboard keeps updating whether anyone likes it or not, and California's numbers have a frustrating habit of contradicting the press releases. What fascinates is how confidently he presents failure as sophistication, as if complexity alone proves progress. Policies are rolled out with impressive-sounding explanations until someone asks if they actually worked. Then the conversation shifts to values, intentions, and the moral high ground of trying. Maher's humor thrives in that pivot because nothing invites mockery quite like a system that demands applause for effort while dodging accountability.
Laws, as we've talked about, and this one I think says if you're a department store with over 500 employees, you have to have a gender-neutral toy department.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it.
So do you think that's silly? Do you think that's a silly thing that we too much government there?
That's an interesting one because the department stores came to us supporting that, and they were the ones making a case for that. They were making a case they're already moving in that direction.
Wanted you to make a law about them?
Rising homelessness wasn't treated as an emergency that demanded bold action. It was framed as a tragic inevitability, handled with the same strategies that had already failed. Bill Maher's tone captured the absurdity of watching billions flow into programs that delivered little beyond talking points and new acronyms. Public safety followed a similar pattern where accountability felt outdated and enforcement was treated more like an aesthetic choice than a practical necessity. Gavin Newsom's language stayed calm and academic, even as everyday Californians adapted their routines around what used to be normal life. Gavin Newsom governed as if California's reputation alone could carry the state forever, ignoring the fact that prestige fades when daily life becomes a struggle. Bill Maher's commentary made it clear. Charisma isn't endless, and it won't replace actual results.
You're friends with Newsom.
Yeah.
We live here, right?
Oh,
we
yes.
live in California. I was born here. In Oakland, they have Kaiser Hospital, where my pediatrician was. The hospital put out a notice last week, employees are not to leave for lunch. It's too dangerous.
Right.
In downtown Oakland. That's on him. Our homeless I don't want to hear that the homeless problem is intractable. You want to be CEO? It's your problem. It's your desk.
Yeah.
Even California's once celebrated climate policies started to feel more like exercises in self-congratulation than real solutions. Big goals were announced with plenty of fanfare, while infrastructure lagged behind and the costs landed squarely on consumers. Bill Maher's humor highlighted the irony of lecturing the world on sustainability while struggling to deliver the basics reliably at home. The deeper issue was that dissent had become unfashionable, treated more like a moral flaw than a necessary check. Gavin Newsom thrived in a system where agreement was assumed and skepticism was treated with suspicion. Bill Maher's shift reminded viewers that even loyal audiences grow tired when criticism is brushed aside instead of answered. California's leadership increasingly felt like a closed loop, where ideas circulated without ever meeting reality. People were expected to celebrate progress they couldn't see and defend policies they couldn't afford. Maher's voice cut through that illusion, turning applause into laughter with a sharper edge. As California moves forward, the jokes may fade, but the consequences won't. Gavin Newsom's legacy continues to form, defined less by intention and more by impact. Bill Maher's commentary served as a reminder that even the smoothest narratives eventually collide with reality, and when they do, satire is often the first thing honest enough to survive the crash.